At every class, I'm going to be trying to show you something that maybe you haven't seen before. I do this week. My son and I play this stupid game. Is that whenever we're out and about in the world, always look for something you've never seen before. Why do that? Aside from having attention deficit. Why look for things you've never seen before? Well, knowing more stuff is something that I like to do because I know stuff. My neighbors call me Cliff. Cliff Faven from Sears. It's a horrible character that pretends he knows everything. He doesn't know anything. I don't think that's a compliment. Anyway, moving on. But I like to learn stuff. And I have a very annoying memory for useless amounts of giant bits of information. Bless you. Okay, so if you ask me a stupid question, if I don't know the answer, what will I do? No, I don't make it up. I go look it up. I've learned not to BS because you guys have Google. Before you guys had Google, I could say anything. Suckers. Now you look it up. Yeah. All right, it's my fault. Okay, so I just learned useless globs of information. Anyway, so what's the point of this class? It's not philosophy. What's the point of this class? No. What is psychology? Okay, so, well, it's not just behavior. It's, yeah. Study of the mind. Psychology is the study of the mind. We have a problem. Whenever you're trying to scientifically study something, what do you have to do in order to use science? We're going to talk a lot about this next class. Think of something in the College of Sciences here. Give me a science class. Chemistry, great science class. What do you do in chemistry? Not just experiment. We experiment in psychology, but chemistry is different. Okay, there's formulas for stuff. If I mix this and this, will I know what I'm going to get? Yeah. If I mix salt and water, I get salty water. Yeah, throw me down. Okay, so, but if I mix hydrochloric acid and aluminum, what do I get? You get hydrogen and aluminum chloride. Come on, people, you can do the math. Nobody else? Come on. Yeah. You've all done this before. Magnesium strip in the hydrochloric acid, it fizzes, you hold the latch over it, and it goes, poop. Yay. Poop. Hydrogen. I almost blew up a beaker when I taught high school science by doing that. Yeah. I thought it was going to, I messed up the reaction. I thought it was going to produce oxygen, and it was producing hydrogen instead. And so because if you take a candle and you put oxygen onto it, what does it do? It goes, but if you take a candle and you put hydrogen on it, what happens? It explodes and goes back into the test tube and shoots the stopper off the test tube and spreads acid all over the desk. Just saying. Yeah. Okay. But again, chemistry is science. We measure things. We can predict things. If you do the chemistry right, you make good meth. Why did Walter make good meth? He knew the chemistry. It's not rocket science. It's chemistry. Okay? And so that's funny. Anyway, but the idea of this is that psychology is the study of the mind. The mind is not science. Biology is science. What do we do in biology? Come on. Well, we study how life works. We take it apart. And we look at all the little tiny parts and measure everything. Physics. How does physics work? Yeah, every time. Why does it work? Well, there's a formula for gravity. Is it predictable? Yeah, if I let go of the glasses and they don't drop, we're screwed. Just saying, because where will atmosphere go? away. You don't care. Moving on. So, dude, gravity's a constant. Just let it go. Okay, so now, so the idea of the study of the mind is a philosophical thing. Has philosophy ever solved any problems? No. Philosophy is not a science. What is philosophy? Philosophy is the study of thought. Anybody taking philosophy in here this semester? One or two people? You won't solve any problems. But why should everybody take philosophy? It's a really good class to take. It opens your mind. Well, what is your mind? I don't know. It's in philosophy. See the problem? So, old philosophers, back in early BC days, as soon as we stopped hitting things with sticks, philosophers came up with the idea, the notion that we have a mind. Why do we have a mind? Good morning. What does it do? Prove it. Prove it. See, the problem is you try to science. Can I prove chemistry? If anybody's taken chemistry, you've done proofs, just for the record. Anytime you've done physics, if you measure things correctly, physics always works. They throw stuff at Mars and they make it. You think about that for a second? They're basically launching something toward Mars and they actually get there. And everything's moving in different directions. Pretty damn impressive. That's just math. When they first landed on the moon, they didn't have computers. They had geeks doing math on paper. And they made it. Craziness. Okay, so psychology, we study the mind through mental processes. We study the mind through your thoughts. But there's something else. What else do humans do that we try to study? It's not just your thoughts, because we can't really measure those. What can we measure about us? Behavior, good. You said that off the beginning. I purposely ignored it to get to my point. Okay, so we study behavior. Psychology studies the mind through mental processes and behavior. The same ideas from philosophy back then are true today. The same ideas from philosophy are true today as they were back on the day one. Okay, so I'm going to put this up here then. What gives us a mind? Why do we have a mind? Okay, I'm going to write the word brain up here. What is the... Oh, sorry. My neighbor's last name is Devine. It's spelled D-E-V-I-N-E. Sorry. What does divine right mean? There you go. It's given. But a lot of people believe that we have a mind because we are given, and that there's a good and evil. What happens when you lose your mind? Demons. Evil possession causes people to lose their minds. People who are good have a solid mind. That's a really interesting idea. Can you prove that? You say no very quickly. Do humans have a soul? Well, so my mother-in-law passed away in 2013? Yeah, 2013, 2014, somewhere in there. And when we're decorating our house, or my wife is decorating our house, I don't decorate. I don't even put the pillows back on the bed correctly. But there's an order and a pattern to them. I can't figure it out. Anyway, actually don't try, and I purposely screw it up because I think it's stupid. Whatever. Okay, my wife is decorating. She goes, how would my mom decorate the house. My mother-in-law's soul still live. We can look at things from her perspective. She's been dead for a couple of years now. So I'm going to write this little word up here. This is a philosophical term. You guys use it for the internet and damn eggs. Okay? But, that's the latest from myself. Okay? But what does it mean? Come on. Baby shark, do 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 baby. Okay, what does it mean? Come on, you use them all the time. Well, that's a lot of damage. That's my son's favorite one. Awesome. It's an idea. It's a thought that creates, it gets a life of its own. So I want you to think about this. This is really heavy-duty philosophy stuff. Your thoughts can grow and evolve. Somebody takes a picture of an egg and says, I want to make this more popular than Kylie Jenner. So what they do is they just post it, most posts, whatever, most likes on Instagram, whatever it was. Okay? And so my son runs over, grabs my phone, opens my Instagram and likes the egg. Like, what are you doing? Now I'm going to get a bunch of spammers following me because I like the damn egg. But what happens is that this idea has now transcended itself. The person who came up with the initial egg idea, what has happened to that idea? The person who came up with that egg idea is not posting 1,000 other pictures of people holding eggs. But what's happening? Yes, the internet's a fun place. Yeah. Other people are taking that idea, and now that meme has a complete new life to itself. There's a book that started a lot of different religions. The Old Testament, the Torah, the Quran, a lot of the old parts of it are the same damn book. But what's happened? Whoever, either divine or person, wrote the book has their ideas transcended their own self. That's why people use religion as a concept, because the ideas that were formed live today. Are the ideas that were formed back in the BC days, are they just as powerful today as they were back when they were formed? Yeah, the people have moved on. The people have born and died. The people have born and died. But the idea lives on. That's what a meme is. The idea has its own evolution. And how do we know ideas evolve and have their own life? Or a soul? Judaism, Christianity, Islam. It's practiced differently. The same basic rules apply. What about Confucius and Buddhism? How long ago were they written? Thousands of years ago? Do people still practice? Is it the same as they practiced back 1,000 years ago? No, it's evolved. The Hindu religions, and all the Krishna and Vishnu and all those guys, that was evolved a long time ago, and it's manifested itself now. The ideas have life. This is really irritating. Where do ideas have life? So if we rewrite history, where do ideas have life? In this thing that the humans have called a mind. Wow, man. So I'll get off with this is kind of that's philosophy nonsense. But we want to study psychology. Why do we study psychology? What's the point of studying psychology? Why try to study this mind? We're not going to sit and philosophize the entire semester because that's stupid. That's philosophy. Don't tell them I said it's stupid. I really like the philosophy department. That's okay. Why do this? What do most people see a psychologist for? So it turns out that most people that study psychology and most people that see a psychologist need help. Now, does that mean that you're weak and bad? No. All of you could benefit from seeing a psychologist because what does a psychologist study? Your mind. So we're going to go through and talk about exactly what mind is in a little bit, but the idea of studying psychology is basically to try to understand the mind. I'm going to write predict up here. The reason why we study psychology is to understand, predict, describe, and, what's the last word? Control, which is another fancy way of saying help. People don't like mind control. We want to help your mind. We want to control your mind. Same thing. If you have bad behavior, what do we want to do? Fix it. Make you more functional. If you're anxious, what can we do? Manage anxiety. We don't fix your anxiety. I had a wonderful student last semester that suffers from anxiety, and he was super, super smart, loved reading, but when he got to test, he would go like this. He'd hold his breath. Why would he hold his breath? I'm out of breath doing that. Because he's anxious. And the stupid part of his brain that produces anxiety says, panic! Can you concentrate when you're holding your breath? Well, on holding your breath. Yeah, then lower oxygen levels in your brain, and then you can't think as well, so you get stressed, and then you get stressed, so you hold your breath more. So once during the final, I said, go outside. Walk around. Look at the trees. Find a cricket. Make it your friend. Hello, cricket. Basically, get out of your own head for a second. Does that help you? Everybody who procrastinates knows getting out of their own head for a second is a wonderful place to be. However, what if you stay out of your head for a couple seconds? Well, days, weeks, and you kind of live in your parents' basement? Yeah. Moving on. So, you got to come back. No, nothing wrong with living in your parents' basement. Okay. Mom, I said I wanted waffles. Okay, sorry. Whoa, what movie is that from? Will Ferrell said it. Wedding Crashers. Okay, sorry. So, the idea of trying to explain and control your mind, this is what psychology does. This is what we do. So what we want to do is we want to explore the whole semester. We're going to explore the different ways that psychology does this. And then we're going to eventually get to what we call applied psychology, which I'll talk about in a few minutes. But we're going to figure out how to use the stuff that we study in some sort of functional way. Because it's not just philosophy. Psychology actually has a lot of real experience because most people work in which setting? Mind control. We call it therapy, but whatever. Is it really mind control? Okay, so going back to this. So if memes are ideas that other people generate that live within your consciousness, that live within yourself, what is the mind? I want to show you an example here. I got to remember, someone remind me to start the recording again after. Is your mind based on your experiences? How do you know what red is? Because I've seen it. his sweatshirt, and your sweatshirt is red. He learned it. So when he sees something that he has, so if he's looking around the audience, when he gets to the red color, it is a specific frequency, sound. I'm going to send another video home that takes this up a notch, but you have to wait for that one. But so what happens is he hears a frequency sound. So as he's dreaming, if he's dreaming about looking at you all in class, and he's looking around in his dream, what is he hearing in his dream? It would, except, does seeing color get annoying? No, because we have learned, if you see color, we have learned that color has meaning and purpose and value. Our experience have told our mind that we need to pay attention to this sort of thing. My son and I like cars. So my son and I pay attention to cars. And my wife does not pay attention to cars. Her and her friends went out for my friend's 40th birthday. They went out to this fancy place in La Jolla, not my space. And there's a frickin' McLaren that's sitting in the parking lot at this La Jolla restaurant. Beautiful yellow, brand new McLaren. My son are like, oh! My wife goes, what? She's looking around, doesn't even see the McLaren. Sorry. How could you not see the McLaren? She's like, it's a car. It's a beautiful car. Okay? And I would never want one because I like my van, but that's okay. It's still, you respect the technology. And there was like 7 Series, Rolls Royce, we're in the wrong town. All these beautiful cars are sitting there. My son and I always go to the valet whenever we go to fancy places, just to look at the cars. Okay, if you look at my photo feed, if you look for cars, there's a really pretty Porsche GT3 that was parked at Fashion Valley. We took pictures of it. It was so cool. And the owner was super cool. He's like, yeah, do you like it? Like, yeah, it's my 3rd one. Okay. Barely affording a used Rogue for my daughter. Thank you. But 2002, it's a good year. Okay, so only 170,000 miles. It'll be fine. No. Anyway, but the idea is that why do we notice a McLaren? My wife doesn't. It has a frequency in our brains. It has a sound in our brains. That sound is woo, but the experience create the mind. So your experiences, your sensation, and perception. Sensation and perception. That's like bubblegum color. Anyway, sensation and perception create the mind. Hot dog. That's the name of that color. Like cheap hot dog. Like not good hot dog, but good hot dog. They don't exist. Okay, moving on. Cooked hot dog. So I'm going to put this other question up here that philosophers like to do. Okay? Remember, your experiences make the mind. Are we creatures that live in our mind, or are creatures that live in our body? Prove it. Okay, so there are people that are monists. That say that the mind and the body are the same thing. There are people that are dualists. That say the mind is one thing and the body is the opposite thing. I wrote arrows backwards as I was saying that. Sorry about that. So we're going to shift between monism and dualism in this class. Because if you are a monist, you believe that the mind and body are the same thing. My physiopsych course, I teach a class that studies the brain all semester. They're monists. Because what do we study in that class? The body, the brain, not the mind. We study the brain. It's actually a type of psychology called neuroscience. Study of brain. Such a fun class. Okay, so she was in there last semester. But the dualists say there's a mind and a body. So there's a problem with the monists. And I'm going to write another type of philosophy up here that I think is actually more irritating. The mentalists and the realists. What's a mentalist? Go ahead. Well, there are people who live in a fake world and people who live in a real world. That's not exactly what this means. A mentalist believes that reality is created by our consciousness. Mentalists believe that the world around us exists because we understand it. The realists believe that the world exists and we're watching it. So there's a whole, like the whole Matrix movies, and there's a whole bunch of movies where people wake up from a dream that they thought they were living a reality, but they weren't. It was just a fake reality. Believe it or not, that's childhood. When you're a little kid, some fat guy with a beard comes down your chimney, if you're Christian, and gives you presents. Even if you're not Christian, you go, oh, they get Santa Claus. We don't get Santa Claus. A lot of my friends were Jewish growing up. Pissed at us for getting Santa Claus. Okay, we get 8 presents. Yeah, but you have to fast. Okay, so the idea of the mentalist is that when you're a kid, there's so much more reality. There's a tooth fairy. My daughter had the poopy fairy. She was terrified of going to the bathroom and the toilet. Sorry, Ella, this will be on your 16th birthday card. But, which is next year. Ooh, in April. I made that joke for years. Now I realize that's April. Heh. Breathe. Okay, so now, but she had a really hard time using the bathroom when she was 3. So the pediatrician said, poopy fairy. Yeah, if you drop one in the toilet, poopy fairy leaves you a present the next morning. My daughter's like, really? But I really want a Little People School. $70 later, Little People School. You remember Little People? We had a whole Little People village. Pretty amazing. She wanted the school really badly. So guess what? She pooped. Next morning, somebody was going to Target and getting Little People School. However, what did she believe? Little brown fairy with pixie dust flew into the bathroom and dropped it. She didn't get the Mr. Hinky joke, but whatever. So the idea of this meant that, does the world exist in a greater reality as a little kid? Magic works. What happens when you're 8, though? The lies your parents are telling you. No wonder middle school kids don't trust us. Okay, because the kids become much more realists. So we're going to shift back and forth between mentalist and realist this semester. We're going to shift back and forth between monist and dualist. Because I'll give you a sad answer in psychology. There's never one answer for anything. Because we study the mind only exists where? Are we just special and have a mind? Do dogs have a mind? They don't think much about the future. My little fluffy dog, she wants a bite of whatever I'm eating right now. Does she think about what she's going to eat tomorrow? Can she plan her meals out for the week? No. But she can dig in the trash can if something's stinky in there. Her favorite, spaghetti. Always take out the trash if you have spaghetti. White fluffy dog, spaghetti. She comes in, she looks like it's a horror movie. It's awful. Okay. Yeah. So, I apologize for the next 5 minutes or so. This is the history of psych. How do we get to where we are in psychology? We have to go through this. So I put this word up here. It's called psychophysics. This was the start of the study of psychology. Psychophysics is Neil Harbison, the guy with the sensor in his video. Sensation and perception. Psychophysics is where we started. What does psycho mean? Doesn't mean crazy, but it means mind. Good. Did I restart the recording? Yes, I did. It's working. Okay. And what does physics mean? Yeah, or mechanics. The first studies of psychology were all in the study of the mechanics of the mind, trying to figure out how the mind works. They use silly things like sound. I have a bunch of really cool old crap in my office that were from the early days of psych. I've kind of been collecting this stuff. These old projectors that they could project light of different intensities on screens, different colors they could project on screens. These illusions that we tried to measure, it's called the Myers illusion. If you want to come check it out, it's really neat in my office. But these big boards with these lines on them. And what's really cool, but they're trying to figure out the basic elements that make up the mind. And it founded a school of psychology called structuralism. Structuralism is the structure of the mind. What's really interesting is that there are still people who do this. The first guy who did this, his name was Wilhelm Wundt. He set up the first laboratory to study the structure of the mind, to try to figure out reaction time. I'm going to write this up here. Try to figure out the elements of what the mind was. He used an old telegraph key to study reaction time. So let me show you what this looks like. Hi, Neil. I have glasses, but I refuse to look at them. Okay. So this is an old telegraph machine. Okay. This one has the tape on it. Okay, so what this was is, so this little wheel right here has a thin roll of paper on it. Okay? So when you tap this little key right here, it creates an electrical spark. They would take these electrical sparks and put them up these giant antennae at like gigawatts of power. And the antenna would go zap, zap, zap. And if you were about 20 miles away in another telegraph tower, what could you hear? Sparks. You could hear the sparks. Anybody hear static on your... I don't even listen to the radio anymore, but if you listen to the radio, you hear static. That's what they would hear. But you would hear a pattern in the static. So you'd do dot, and what's the other side of it? Dash. You'd hold it down for a second. And by making a combination of dots and dashes, they could communicate over distance. Ooh, science! Well, then they discovered if they put a wire between the two things, they could transmit the signal further and faster. This is where science was at the time. So this Wilhelm Wundt came up with this idea saying, hey, the piece of paper was basically just between two pieces of metal contact. So when the spark hit, it left a little burn mark in the paper. If the paper rolled through at a steady rate, we could measure the dots and dashes. So someone could send a message, and this little machine, this is their tape recorder, would record the dots and dashes on the piece of paper coming out of the tape machine. People who could read Morse code would sit there and look at it and could decipher, just like this guy. What is this? There's a Black Ops. What's the game where it's one of those shooter games where you're like World War II and you're trying to do the missions? It's on the Xbox. There's one of the games that my ex-brother-in-law and his brother played. It's like Soldier of Fortune or something, but it's like, I don't know, one of the Xbox shooter games was nasty. But it turns out, if you play, I forget which game it was. Dang it, I'll have to look it up. But if you walk around and look around at the buildings, there's all these little secret compartments and secret hidden things that you can Google and find. And there was one that in the window in one of the buildings in this game was flashing. Like it looked like it was burning out. But my ex-brother-in-law and his brother were both Navy guys. And what do they both know? Morse code. He's walking around the game and he looks up and he's like, haha. So he starts writing down the dot and dashes, and it tells him coordinates in the game to go to get some bigger gun that blows more people up. I don't know. But so because he was a Navy operator, he had to learn Morse code. Because he learned Morse code, those flashings mean something to him. He wasn't looking for it, but his mind found it. It is really cool, but these guys need to get a life, and that's an ex-brother-in-law, but that's not important. Okay. Yes, because it's useful. And I don't play Xbox. Okay, so, because I'm smart. And I don't have time to play Xbox games. I would have the driving, my son's got the driving wheel. I'd be doing that all day. Now, so what Wilhelm Wundt did is he took this technology and used it to measure reaction time. He dropped a ball, hit the table, click, and then the person hit the telegraph key. When the ball hit the table, it started the tape moving. When the person pushed the key, it stopped the tape moving. What did he have a measure of? He had a measure of how long it takes to think. I'm going to drop 2 balls on the table. I'm going to make you a small ball and a heavy ball. Only react if you hear the heavy ball. Click. What happens to your reaction time if I have to make a choice between 2 things? Just guess. It slows down. The reaction time slows down. Wilhelm Wundt measured that. And he said, I can measure how long it takes a person to think. Psychophysics. Are we still doing this? There's a whole school called cognitive psychology, which is all trying to measure how you think. UCSD has the psychology is not called psychology. It's behavioral neuroscience and cognitive science. They are structuralists. They're structuralists. They're trying to figure out the structure of the mind. I'm going to tell you very quickly, they'll never succeed. No matter how much we study the brain, do you think we'll understand the mind through brain? Wait till we talk about the brain, then you'll start to realize why I say this. Last year, a structuralist lab called the Connectome Project, 2 years ago now, discovered 97 new areas of the brain we didn't know we had. 2 years ago, they found 97 new parts of the brain that were connected that we didn't know were connected. And so all of a sudden, the whole way that we think about the brain, all the stuff that we teach in physio, might be out the window because there's a new way of understanding the brain that makes us go, well, that's not how we thought it worked. It's completely amazing. But the best part, it's like, if you look at the history of dinosaurs, my son has a book called Science Got It Wrong, and it's all about things that we thought that science proved wrong, and then how science proved it wrong, and then how then some more science proved that science wrong. And it's a great book because anybody know what dinosaurs used to be? Dragons. Chinese discovered and Japan discovered dinosaurs a long time before Western society did. And they put the bones together and they became dragons. It is very cool. And these mythical creatures that lived a long time ago, hey, wow. Anyway, so, but we thought, like when the British first discovered some dinosaur, they thought it had this giant horn on its nose. It turned out it was its thumb that they stuck on its nose. Iguanodon. But, whatever. But the idea of it is that the more we discover, what is it? Okay, what did I start the class with? What did we show you? Bike racing. If you have no idea about what the bike racing is, how do you find out about the bike racing? Ask questions. Try to figure out the structure of it. Once you figure out the structure of it, do you understand it more? But then it makes you ask more questions. Which makes you ask more questions, which makes you ask more questions. That's what the structuralism is all about. What is the structure of the mind? What questions can we ask? Once we find out the answers to those, it makes us ask more questions. That's the same thing in physio. Every time we get to a section, people go, but what? At the end of physio, at the end of the brain class, you have more questions than when you started the class. That's the way it should be. So there's another way of studying psychology. It's called functionalism. Yep. Functionalism is about what does the mind do? Why do we have a mind? What's the point of having a mind? Why study it? That's functionalism. In other words, the key word is, what is the function of the mind? So it's funny, I think, this guy by the name of William James wrote the first textbook in psychology about the function of the mind. This is cool because, well, anybody know what the mind does? Why do we have a mind? I wrote at the beginning at the top. What is the function of the mind? Behaviors and mental processes. Go back down. So, what does the mind do? Behaviors. Thoughts. This is why most psychologists now focus on therapy. A therapist doesn't go in and study the structure of your mind. They study the structure of your thoughts. They look at your behavior. A therapist doesn't do brain scans. They don't care about the structure of your consciousness. What do they care about? I'm going to go back up here. A therapist doesn't believe that you are a way you are. A therapist believes what makes you how you are. Somebody say it. Experiences. So a therapist will go in and look at your experiences and say, this is why you are. And it's interesting because if you use the given aspect of it, some people are good and some people are bad. That's the way a lot of religions treat things. But a psychologist doesn't look at it that way. We look at it as what has happened to you? What is your experience? How are you thinking about this? And that's what have you learned? Okay, so I'm going to scroll back down again. So it turns out that there are schools, we're going to talk about this in a minute, there's schools of psychology, there's structural schools of psych. I studied structuralism. I'm a structuralist. I'm a brain and behavior guy, and I love studying cognitive things with the computer. But I'm not going to answer any therapy questions because it gives me a rash talking to people about their problems. It makes me very uncomfortable. I'm happy to talk, but I can't help it. Because we need a functionalist in the house. Why do we need a functionalist? These are the people that help you. They're the people that look at the functioning of your mind. So the reality of it is this word. The Gestalt. I'm going back to the stupid bike race at the beginning of class. If you just look at the whole thing as a whole, is it a complete mess? People riding all over the place on the track, people slinging people left and right. You can't know what's going on. Every so often the announcer sounds excited, but then he sounds extremely bored. But the whole gestalt of the race is hard to understand until you start learning the rules. Once you start learning the rules, you sit back and watch the race, do you understand it better? The gestalt is the whole thing. Okay, so in reality, do you think your body or your mind has a structural component and a functional component? Do you think it's both? So, this is a really hard question. What is the gestalt of the guy with the robot eyeball? What's the whole thing? What's the big picture we get out of it? He perceives color. The gestalt is, he can walk through the grocery store if you watch the whole thing, and he goes, the aisle of cleaning products is just fabulous. Okay, and he goes through the entire, because if you think about a cleaning product aisle, What do we see if we see color? Lots and lots of colors. What does he hear? Lots and lots of sounds, but what does he perceive? What's the gestalt? He perceives color. Does anybody have an old car in here? Nobody? That has its own special, unique qualities to make it go. Most of the cars that I've ever had in my life had rules. Like, I borrowed my friend's pickup truck, and he goes, okay, so if you turn it on, you have to listen to the fuel pump. If you don't hear the fuel pump come on, turn it off, switch tanks, turn the fuel pump on again. If you hear the fuel pump go, it'll start. Well, it's cars with rules. Like one of my students had an old Baja Bug, and he's like, I could hear him driving up. And he's like, dude, get a tune-up. He goes, I know. But he knows that if it starts sputtering, let off the gas, put in the clutch, touch the gas, let off the clutch, put the gas back in, and it'll keep going. The cars with rules. What's cool is if you actually, when you have a car that's old and dilapidated like that, and you drive it, do you pay attention to all those things? No, because the gestalt is you're driving your car. But when you try to explain to someone else how to drive it, my old Mercedes had a crappy transmission, and it had 380,000 miles on it, and I didn't have the odometer working for 3 years, so it has a right to have a crappy transmission. And so I said, okay, right when it's about to shift, you need to let off the gas so it can shift, then put the gas back down. It's an automatic, but still. We're tired. So people are like, well, how do you know when it's ready to shift? You can tell. How do you know? Because you can tell. And so that's the gestalt. The whole thing is what your sensation and perception becomes. We don't pay attention to the details anymore. What do you pay attention to? The gestalt, the whole thing. It's like as you become more and more student-y, you stop paying attention to all the little things you have to do as a student, and you just focus on being a student. When you first become a student, you have to really pay attention to all the details. My poor little daughter driving has to pay attention to all the details. So I would throw her phone in the back seat when she's driving because it's distracting for her. My phone's not distracting for me because I don't use it when I'm driving. I talk to Google, but I won't tap on my phone because it turns out whenever you touch your phone, it takes your attention away from whatever you're doing. If you talk to your phone, it doesn't affect your attention as much. Still does affect your attention, but not as much. Okay. So the idea is, once you understand the gestalt, is there a way to measure the gestalt? It's hard. Because is the whole thing different for every single one of you? Does every single one of you have a different mind? Not for long. Now, moving on. So, the problem with the gestalt is that it's unique for everybody. So as you're driving away, as you're walking across campus, you start to think differently. Think about on the freeway. What are you paying attention to? What are you focusing on? What are you looking at? Well, is it changed depending on what day it is? Yeah. If you I said this, and my son has been ribbing on it before. The new Toyota Camrys look pretty cool. Have you ever seen them? They're like lower and longer. I'm like, wow, that's a cool car. And he goes, Dad, it's a Camry. I'm like, oh, I just said it's a cool Camry, didn't I? Yeah, I'm not old. Yeah. It's like when we had a Nissan Altima forever, and like no one's ever said, ooh, nice Altima. But I said, nice Camry. Oh. Anyway, so we're going to buy a Lexus for a while, and my wife goes, ooh, I really like that color Lexus, and my son goes, that's a Camry. She goes, nope, Lexus is off the table. She has a Nissan now, but whatever. Okay, so let's talk about the rejection of the gestalt. Let's go the opposite way. A school of psychology called behaviorism erupted. The gestalt kind of took over structuralism and functionalism, and so the behaviorism revolted. Behaviorism only studies behavior. Behaviorism only studies behavior. All behavior, all the time, no thought, no mind. Behaviorism works because it's the only thing that's real. As much as we love talking about the mind, the behavioral school of psychology called behaviorism is the only thing that's real. It's the only thing that you can actually tangibly measure in science. It's the only thing that holds up to chemistry and physics in psychology. All the other stuff we talk about is philosophy. We guess, we hypothesize, we check. But behaviorism studies behavior. It's real. So, anybody know the problem with only studying behavior? It's not the Gestalt. If we studied Neil Harbison's behavior, we would have a hard time understanding why and what he's doing. But if you understand the Gestalt of his learning process and how he understands color, it's so much easier to figure out what's happening. When I send you the video home to watch, hopefully it blows your mind a little bit because you realize that humans are just the surface of what we can be when we start looking at this, making better humans and better robots. Okay. So, we actually do use 100% of our brain. Because if you don't use, it's like a muscle. If you don't use a muscle, what happens to it? It atrophies. I hurt my Achilles. My daughter was rolling backwards downhill on her bike, and I took a couple sprinty steps to get it, and I partially ruptured my Achilles. So I got to wear a boot for 6 weeks. Yay! Clunk, clunk, and then the bottom part wore off, and it was slippery. So I fell down 2 or 3 times with my damn boot. Anyway, but when I took my boot off after X period of time, my calf was 2 inches smaller than my other calf. You know, it grew back, but I took it off. I'm like, holy crap! When I hurt my back and I lost the feeling of my left leg, my quad shrank because you don't use the muscles, what happens to them? The body doesn't send nutrients to them and they shrink, they don't grow. The brain works the same way. So if your brain's not being used, you wouldn't have it. So you use all the brain that you have. A friend of my mom is suffering very severely from Alzheimer's right now. What's happening with her brain? It's dying. It's actually, the way it's dying is that parts of it aren't being connected. So the parts that are downstream from that connection are losing connections. And at this point, she's very close to being put in a home, but she doesn't know when she's going to the bathroom. She refuses to wear a diaper. She refuses to shower. And it's very awful because she's not being obstreperous. She's not just being combative. She doesn't understand what she's doing. She has no concept of self or awareness around her. And it's really scary to watch someone deteriorate. My wife and I have a back over in the driveway clause in our relationship at that point. I'm going to be changing the tire, hon. Just make sure you get the head on the first run. Because do you want to be like that? Is she even aware who she is? The answer is sometimes. Because the gestalt is completely different for someone with Alzheimer's. Very creepy. Okay, so really quickly, if you want to study psychology, and I only know a few, how many people are psych majors? 2 in here? I remember? 3? Excellent. Okay, so if you're a psych major, I'll talk to you 3. Okay, there's 2 branches of psych. There's schools of psychology, how we study psychology, and then there's the applied branches of psych. So, anybody know the number 1 applied branch of psychology? What all people like to do? Clinical. Clinical psych. Clinical psych is? No, not much. My friend is my age, 47, 48, and she has been working as a clinical psychologist, and she is now making profit. Yeah, because she started her own practice. It's easy to work in someone else's practice and counsel and make money, but she started her own practice. She has her own office, she has her own license, and she has 2 or 3 therapists working with her in her practice. And it's like starting your own doctor's office. There's a lot of money up front, a lot of insurance up front, and it's taken a long time for her to become positive income flow. But why does she do it? She loves helping people. That's what she does. She loves helping people. And she does a lot of really good work helping people. Anyway, but that's clinical psych. So the way we study psychology, I'm just going to write this up here really quickly. We study it through the brain. We study it through behaviorism, the study of behavior. I'm going to write this in sparkly gold or magic. I don't know why I wrote psychology. They're all psychology, but oh well. Cognitive. What is the study of cognitive? Yeah, it's your thoughts. I wrote it in magic because it exists more in the gestalt than it does in reality. Behavioral school psychology, physiopsych, structuralists. Cognitive psychology, your thoughts, exist in the gestalt, which is very hard to actually measure. We can measure the structure, but we can't know exactly what you're thinking. I'm going to write another one up here, which is even more magic, but I'll keep with the same magic font. Psychodynamic is your unconscious. Psychodynamic is these unconscious forces and motivations that drive and push you. Why is it also magic? You don't even know your unconscious mind. A therapist talks to you and unpacks your unconscious mind, according to the psychodynamic approach. It's, as a behaviorist and a physiological psychologist, I think that's crap. However, as a clinician, do you think there's some unconscious baggage that you have that are causing your adult problems? Guaranteed. I always draw the metaphor. A clinician has, everybody's carrying a little wheelie suitcase behind them. What's at the bottom of that wheelie suitcase? Mom leaving you by kindergarten one day and not picking you up. A fight you had with your sister that resulted in you hurting her and you're getting upset about it. All this crap has been pushed down deep inside that little suitcase. How come you haven't looked at that stuff for a while? It's right behind you. And it's always right there. It's easy to stuff more stuff on top of it and pretend it doesn't exist. But does that stuff eventually weigh you down? There was a math teacher walking yesterday, almost done. Math teacher walking, and I said, hey, you got your emotional baggage behind you, because he's carrying a little milk crate on a little cart. And he goes, you have no idea. He got the metaphor immediately. Okay. So the last one, I was going to write up here and I'll explain next class. It's called humanistic psychology. It's the study of yourself. Clinical psychology, applied psychology uses all of these. Okay, so hit stop.